In 1965, walk into almost any workshop in Australia and you will find him. The fitter and turner. He stands at a lathe the size of a small car, a pencil tucked behind his ear, reading a drawing he could almost recite in his sleep. He takes a rough block of steel and turns it into a part accurate to 1/1000th of an inch. He files, he bores, he threads, he fits. When a machine breaks down anywhere in the country, in a flour mill, a coal mine, a power station, a brewery, it is the fitter and turner who is sent for. He is not a specialist in one narrow thing. He is the man who can make or mend almost anything made of metal. Every town of any size has dozens of them. They are the quiet engine of an industrial nation, and they know exactly what they are worth. But here is the strange part. The fitter and turner has not disappeared because the country stopped needing him. He has disappeared because the country stopped making him. And to understand how that happened, you have to look at where these men came from. They did not come from nowhere. They were made, on purpose, by a system built to make them. The great public employers carried the load. In Sydney, the Eveleigh railway workshops near Redfern were once the largest industrial complex in the whole country, employing more than 5,000 workers at their peak. Eveleigh built the first steam locomotives ever made in Australia. A young man could start there at 15, before he had even finished school, and serve a 5-year apprenticeship. Learning at the bench beside a tradesman who had learned the same way 30 years before. Joe Cahill, who later became Premier of New South Wales, started at Eveleigh in 1907 as an apprentice fitter and turner. That was the pathway. The workshop floor was a school, and the country paid for it gladly because it knew it would always need the men who came out the other end. It was the same across the nation. In Melbourne, the Newport workshops at their peak in the 1920s employed over 5,000 people on a single site. The Islington workshops in Adelaide did the same for South Australia. The State Electricity Commission of Victoria, founded in 1918, took boys at 16 and turned out qualified tradesmen at 20. State Electricity Commission apprenticeships were among the most sought-after positions a young Victorian could win. The dockyards did the same. The tramways did the same. Every one of these places was a public institution that trained its own people year after year, generation after generation, because that is what a serious country does. And it is worth stopping for a moment to understand what these men actually built, because we have almost forgotten the scale of it. Take Newport. At its height, it was one of the best equipped engineering establishments in the country, and the men there could make or mend almost anything connected with a railway. Nuts, bolts, and screws by the thousand. Carriages, electric trains, full steam locomotives, more than 500 of them built on that site alone. In 1937, the men at Newport built the Spirit of Progress, Australia's first fully air-conditioned all-steel passenger train, a machine so far ahead of its time that people travelled just to look at it. When the Second World War came, the same workshop turned its hand to the war effort overnight. The fitters and turners who had been making train parts on the Friday were making Bren gun carriers, aircraft fuselages and ship hulls. Hulls on the Monday. The workshop ran around the clock, day shift and night shift, with a workforce of 5,000, of whom more than a third were women who had stepped onto the tools while the men were away. That is what a trained workforce gives a country. Flexibility, the ability to make whatever is needed, whenever it is needed, without asking permission from anyone overseas. It was hard, dangerous work, and nobody pretended otherwise. At Newport, a trained nurse was kept on site in the ambulance ward from the early 1920s, and on an average day, she treated around 65 men for injuries. 65 men a day. These were not soft jobs. A man came home tired, sometimes cut, sometimes burned. But he came home having made something real with his hands. And he came home to a wage that could keep a family, buy a house, and put food on the table on one income. The work asked a great deal of him, and in return, it gave him a place in the world that no one could take away. He was a tradesman. He had served his time. That meant something in the street, in the pub, at his own kitchen table, and he was never alone in it. Behind every one of these men stood an entire structure built to carry him from boyhood to mastery. The technical college in the evening, where he learned the mathematics and the drawing behind the work. The tradesman on the floor who had been ordered to teach him and took a quiet pride in doing it well. The trade certificate exam that proved he could do what he claimed. The union that made sure his wage matched his skill. None of this happened by accident, and none of it was free. A nation chose to pay for it year upon year because it understood a simple thing that we seem to have forgotten. Skill is not born into a man. It is passed from one pair of hands to the next. Break that chain at any single link. The workshop, the college, the apprenticeship, the wage, and the whole thing stops working. You do not lose one generation of tradesmen. You lose the machine that makes every generation after them. Then, piece by piece, that whole system was taken apart. Through the 1980s and 1990s, the great public employers were corporatised, then broken up, then sold. In Victoria, the government of Jeff Kennett split the State Electricity Commission into separate generation, transmission and distribution companies in 1994 and sold the pieces off between 1995 and 1999. The total privatisation haul came to $23.5 billion. In the lead up to the sale of just one power station, Yallourn, around 7,000 jobs were cut, pushing local job losses to 5 times the national average. By the end of just the first year of the Kennett government's program, tens of thousands of public sector workers had already lost their positions. And every one of those public jobs that vanished had once come with something the new private owners had no reason to provide: an apprenticeship. Because that is the quiet truth of it. A private owner answers to shareholders, not to the future. An apprentice is a 4-year cost with no quick return. So when the workshops were sold, the apprentice intake was the first thing cut. The Eveleigh workshops in Sydney closed in 1988. The Newport workshops, after 106 years of continuous operation, ceased their original work in 1992. The factories that survived stopped making their own parts and started buying them finished from overseas. One by one, the places that turned a boy into a tradesman simply switched the lights off. And at the very same moment, the country started telling its young men that none of this mattered anyway. After the Dawkins reforms of 1988, the technical colleges that had sat at the heart of every industrial suburb were folded into universities or left to wither. The message to a 16-year-old changed completely. Where his father had been told that a trade was a secure and honourable life, the son was now told that real success wears a suit and carries a degree. Parents who had served their own time on the tools started steering their boys toward the final years of school and a university place. The apprenticeship was quietly recast as the path for the boys who could not manage the books. The respect drained out of the trade, even though the country still leaned on the men who held it every single day. So here we are. The fitter and the turner never stopped being needed. He sits today on Australia's national skill shortage list, one of the hardest vacancies in the entire country to fill. And of the young ones who do start the apprenticeship now, well under 2/3 ever finish. 4 in 10 fall away before they qualify. A workshop that needs a tradesman waits months and pays a premium when one finally turns up, because the men are simply not there. The country that once trained 5,000 men on a single site now scours the world looking for someone who can read a drawing and stand at a lathe. Think about what that means. The country dismantled the system that made these men. It told a generation the work was beneath them. And now it stands genuinely surprised that there is almost no one left who can wind the handles and turn the spanners. The skill was never the problem. The skill is as valuable as it ever was. The problem was a series of decisions made by named governments in known years to stop paying for the thing that made the men. If you served your time at a railway workshop, at the SEC, at a dockyard or a factory floor, and you have watched all of this happen with your own eyes, subscribe and stay with the channel, because these are the stories that are vanishing along with the men who lived them. What was lost here was never just a job. It was a pathway. The plain and decent understanding that a boy from a working family could leave school at 15, learn a trade the whole world respected, and stand at a bench knowing he could make anything out of a lump of steel. That pathway was not charity. It was an investment, a confident country made in itself, because it believed it would always need to build and mend its own machines. When Australia stopped training fitters and turners, it was not really saying the work no longer mattered. It was saying it no longer believed it needed to make things at all. The men at the lathes knew better. They always did.